I want to tell you about my dear friend Clem Dowler, but to do that, I think I first have to explain how we met. In 2011, I went looking for my grandfather. My father never knew the man, and we knew few particulars of his life. I did know some things. He served in the Army Air Corps in World War II, and he and his B-17 crew were shot down over occupied France. They spent the next 5 months escaping and evading German forces. I also knew that when my grandfather came home from the war, he had a bit of a problem with the ladies. When my grandmother discovered this problem, she took everything, including my 2-year-old father, and moved back with her family. They never heard from my grandfather again. Sadly, through my research, I discovered that my grandfather passed away in 1970. I was never going to have the chance to meet him. He was clearly an imperfect man, but a man I desperately wanted to know more about. And that's how I had the great fortune of meeting my friend, Clem Dowler. He is the last surviving member of my grandfather's air crew. Clem was a ball turret gunner with the 91st Bomb Group 324th Squadron, the same unit as the famous crew of the Memphis Belle. Back in 2011, I wrote him a letter, and to my surprise, he called me just 2 days later. He asked if I would visit him in Parkersburg, West Virginia. Well, I was ecstatic. I was finally going to meet someone who could tell me about my grandfather. I made the 6-hour drive from DC to Parkersburg, palms sweating the entire way, and upon my arrival, what's the first thing Clem asked me to do? He wants me to prove to him that I could drive his antique Farmall tractor. Being a good Ohio boy at heart, I think I did all right. Apparently, I passed the test, because afterwards, Clem sat me down to tell me his story. He and my grandfather were shot down on a mission that was supposed to be a milk run, an easy mission. As a result, the formation came in low, at about 15,000 feet. Unfortunately, the Germans had shipped in flak guns by rail in the days prior. My grandfather was the first to bail out. Clem was the last. Clem described the sensation of free falling as sitting in a lazy boy chair. He leaned back, relaxed, and felt the wind whistle through his pants. I asked him how he could have possibly been relaxed at a time like that. He patted my arm and said, "I was just so happy to get out of that damn plane." Clem executed a delayed parachute release to avoid German machine gun fire. As a result, he broke his leg when he came crashing down directly on the bombed-out runway. He dragged himself to one of the hedgerows surrounding the base, concealing himself inside it. The Germans were creative in the ways they tried to flush him out. They used a tank to flatten portions of the hedgerows. A soldier with a flamethrower then stepped forward and sprayed down the remaining sections of foliage. Clem's luck held out, and he waited until nightfall to make his escape. His plan was to walk out of France to Spain. All of this with a broken leg. Despite this amazing story, Clem didn't have a great deal of information about my grandfather. He did have one interesting story, though. It involved a trip the aircrew took to Austin when they were training stateside. I'll spare you the details, but the long and short of it is that my grandfather truly did have a problem with the ladies. Although Clem winked and nudged me at the end, he said, "I wouldn't really call it a problem, though. To be honest, it was more of a talent." Then Clem did something remarkable, something I'll never forget. He looked me right in the eye and asked me if I'd take him back to France. It could have been the 6 bourbons that he fed me that night, but I looked right back at him and I said yes, with absolutely no hesitation. And in that moment, I could feel my wife literally staring a hole in the side of my head. That is how, for a few weeks, in the fall of 2011, I was able to retrace Clem's and my grandfather's footsteps through the French countryside, to travel through France with a true American hero. And it was during this trip that Clem first told me about his time fighting with the OSS in Operation Group Louise. We had long discussions at night, each of us dipping into the liquor in the French hotel's mini fridge. Clem told me about some of the painful memories he had from that period, how he still had vivid dreams that he was being chased through the woods by soldiers, and how his friend and crewmate, Herb Campbell, was tortured to death by the Germans. Clem said he always knew he was going to die. That was the only way to get through it, to accept death and then keep on going. The OSS was Clem's salvation. He joined Operation Group Louise on the ground in France. As he will soon tell you, these men didn't fight like traditional soldiers. Their special brand of warfare was intended to keep the enemy off balance. They used plastic explosives to sabotage bridges and derail trains. They moved in close to the enemy and then opened up with everything they had. They showed Clem how to use mud and berries to camouflage his face. They gave him basic instruction on small unit tactics. The rest he was forced to learn through on-the-job training. As our time in France came to a close, Clem and I were invited by the French Air Force to visit the Avoord Air Base. This is the same French air base that Clem and my grandfather bombed in 1944. The French Air Force scheduled the takeoff of a Boeing-made AWACS aircraft in Clem's honor. They took us up in the tower overlooking the airfield. As I looked at Clem gazing out on the runway below, I realized he was looking back across all those years to his journey through France and his time with the OSS, and on his journey through life, his children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and now great-great-grandchild. Right there at the end of that old runway was where Clem fractured his ankle 70 years prior. And that's when I noticed something I hadn't seen before. In the rich green grass between the tower and the runway, I could see these perfectly symmetrical circles. The grass inside them was lighter in color, and they were located in tight groupings throughout the base. These were the bomb craters from that long-ago mission. The effect of that great conflict was still there on the runway and surrounding grounds, and on Clem himself and every noble American soldier who selflessly offered up their lives in defense of our great nation. And at that exact moment, Clem looked over at me and he smiled. I had gone on a journey looking for my grandfather, and in that moment, I realized I had truly found him. Thank you, Clem, for all that you have taught me about family and service. I am honored and humbled by the opportunity to present you with this award tonight.
He will talk.
Thank you, McKay, for that outstanding, beautiful introduction. In 1942, I dropped out of high school and joined the Army Air Corps. In 1944, I was in England, assigned as a ball turret gunner on Crew 87, a B-17 Flying Fortress. On April the 28th, we were on our way to Avoord, France, to bomb a German air base. We dropped the bombs. Being in the ball turret, I had the best view of the target, and we tore them up real good. But soon after we dropped bombs, we got a hit. The flak guns of the Germans was using shot number 3 engine off, and our plane was on fire. All 10 members bailed out. My problem was when I had an electric heated suit on, and my shoes was made out of felt. So I actually broke my foot. McKay said the leg, but it was a foot that I broke. I still hobbled over to a hedgerow, hid my parachute. The waist gunner, Herb Campbell, was there, and we crawled inside of a hedgerow, laid down side by side, covered up with leaves. Our target time was 12 noon. All afternoon, the German soldiers walked right by our area. We could hear them talking, we could smell their cigarettes, but we laid quiet. They left just before dark. We crawled out of the hedgerow. 2 French farmers was working in the field. They came over to help us. They picked me up, and Herb walked, and we went to a different hedgerow, and they motioned for us to stay. About midnight, they came back and gave us bread, cheese, and 2 bottles of wine each. Then they got us out, and we learned a French word. They pointed and said, "Allez, allez," which means to go. I held on to Herb and hopped on 1 foot for a short distance. We got in the woods. I'm leaning up against a big tree. My foot's killing me. And it started raining, a cold spring rain. I'm about as miserable as possible. When the thought hit me, back in gunnery school, my buddies and I did not do our homework, and the first test they gave, we failed mathematics. So the captain got up and said, "You have 3 choices. You can be transferred to the infantry, you can be transferred to cook and baker school, or you can go to night school and make up your grades." Well, we all wanted to graduate. We tried hard, and we did graduate and got our wings. While I'm laying there against that tree, I thought about them. I actually said to myself, "Clem, you gotta be the dumbest guy there is. You could have been a cook and a baker." So we made it through the night. The next morning, Herb went out and stole the bicycle. Somebody said, "Wasn't it against the law to steal a bicycle?" I said, "During war, you take anything you need." So I would sit on the bike, and he would walk alongside and push me. One morning, we were close to a garden, no house near. I found a piece of a cut potato. I knew they had planted seed potatoes. So I gave Herb a row, and I took a row. We got down and dug up the seed potatoes, put them in a bag we had. We took them to a brook and washed them and ate raw potatoes. We leveled the ground back, and we always wondered what that farmer thought when 2 rows didn't grow. A little later, we're out of food. We're very hungry. We found a cow not close to a house. I knew how to milk. My mother taught me how to milk when I was on that West Virginia farm. I had Herb to put his arm around the cow's neck, and I'm back there milking with 2 hands right in my mouth. Herb decided that he wanted to try. He came back, couldn't get a bit of milk. So he came over on my side with his mouth open saying, "Give me some." And I was milking in his mouth. But I was just ornery enough to shoot some in his eyes. He would wipe it out and come back with his mouth open. We drained that cow, and we always wondered what the farmer thought when there's no milk. So we traveled on south. You see, we had an escape kit in our pocket, and we had a map. We located our area. Again, we were out of food and decided to ask a farmer for help. We knocked on his door about 9 o'clock at night. He came to the door. We were lucky. He took us in, introduced us to his family. His wife cooked a wonderful meal for us. And then they put us in their barn up in the haymow to sleep. The next day, the resistance movement came. Wonderful resistance. They made false identification papers. You see, every Frenchman had to have a passport on their body all the time. My name in French is Jean Maurice au Coutelier. My occupation is I'm a bookkeeper, and I worked for the Germans. And, well, it worked. I still have that passport. I've held on to it. So we traveled on to a town in South France called Valls, France. I'll tell you how we communicated. In our escape kit was a small booklet with a sentence, and right across from it, it said the same thing in French. So we could use that to talk with it. Took a little longer, but it worked. We found out that town was free of Germans. We got there. We had plenty of money in our escape book. We checked in the hotel. First good warm shower that I had since was down. One afternoon, I walked in a bar, and there was a soldier, a lieutenant, fully uniformed, standing there. I walked over and shook hands. He said, "Bonjour, monsieur." I said, "Lieutenant, you don't speak French to me? I'm an American. How in the world did you get here?" Told him our story. It was Lieutenant Rickerson, a wonderful, wonderful officer. He then asked if we wanted to join OSS. He said he had 13 soldiers and 2 officers up in the mountains. We was glad, very glad to hear that. We joined that day. They treated us excellent. Those were the best soldiers I was ever with. We went with them. They gave us weapons. We went with them on some raids. One particular one, they had a 37 millimeter small cannon. We had a farmer with a team of horses to tow it up on a hill, and we opened fire on a German convoy on the Route Nationale, the paved road. We hit a truck and wrecked the truck. Most of our crew had gone back down our side of the hill to get more ammo when the Germans came up and opened fire on our position. They did kill 2 of the Frenchmen who was with us. I took a dive and crawled as far as I could get away. That's how I escaped from that. Just a few days after that, Lieutenant said, "We're getting ready to move north. What do you guys want to do?" And we said, "Well, our directions is to go south." So he sat down and longhand a couple of wonderful letters of recommendation, gave them to us, and we parted. Now, I would like to close by telling you about the bravest OSS lieutenants of anywhere. He found a town in northern France that had lots of German soldiers in it. He got a small French car in full uniform, drove down in the middle of that town, and he asked to see the commanding officer. And when he did, he told that officer that he had the town surrounded with artillery and with tanks, and he said, "Maybe you would like to surrender rather than fight it out." The officer soon said, "We surrender." On that particular day, that small band of OSS troops captured 3,824 Germans, including 2 colonels, 6 majors, 10 captains, 15 lieutenants. Not a bad day's work for OSS. I thank you very much. May God bless you, and may God bless the United States of America.